Sometimes the greatest act of courage is simply reaching out your hand to someone who's lost everything. Sometimes one moment of kindness can change two lives forever. On a frozen January morning in 1887, mountain man Elias Brennan arrived at Timber Ridge Station to pick up winter supplies. Standing alone on the platform was a young woman in a torn wedding dress. Her lips were blue from the cold, her eyes were filled with fear. She'd gotten on the wrong train, running from the wrong man, and now she was stranded with nowhere to go. When Elias offered to help her, he had no idea what he was stepping into. That simple act of mercy would reveal a secret so dangerous that an entire town would come hunting for them both. What was she running from that could bring such violence? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Montana winter of 1887 came down hard and unforgiving, the kind of cold that made a man question his place in the world. Elias Brennan had stopped questioning 5 years ago. He'd made his peace with solitude, with the silence that stretched between one sunrise and the next, with the way his breath formed clouds in the cabin each morning before the fire took hold. At 42, he'd lived enough life to know that sometimes peace came at the cost of connection, and he'd paid that price willingly. The mountains had become his refuge after Sarah died, after the baby died, after the double grave he'd dug in ground so frozen he'd broken 2 shovels and wept until he had no tears left. The town of Timber Ridge had offered sympathy, casseroles, well-meaning visits that felt like intrusions into his grief. So he'd packed what mattered, his tools, his rifles, Sarah's belongings wrapped carefully in oilcloth, and ridden into the Bitterroot Range until he found a place remote enough that no one would follow. The cabin he'd built sat in a valley where 3 streams met, surrounded by pine and spruce so dense that even in summer the shadows ran deep. He'd chosen it for the isolation, for the game trails that meant food, for the small meadow where he could grow what he needed when the ground thawed. He'd chosen it because it felt like the end of something, and he'd been ready for endings. 5 years of solitude had made him into something different. Not harder, exactly, but quieter, more efficient with words and gestures. He could go weeks without speaking aloud, without hearing another human voice. He trapped in winter marten and fox and beaver and traded the pelts in Timber Ridge 4 times a year. That was enough human contact. That was all he could manage. He kept a journal, worn leather covers soft from handling. Inside, pressed between pages of his neat handwriting, were flowers Sarah had loved, columbine and lupine and wild rose. He'd written about her in those pages, about the baby they'd named Hope, even though she'd lived only 3 hours. He'd written about the guilt that ate at him, how he'd been away checking trap lines when Sarah went into labor, how he'd returned to find her already gone, the neighbor women washing her body, while the tiny bundle lay silent in the cradle he'd carved. The journal entries had grown shorter over the years. Then they'd stopped altogether. What was there left to say? The dead stayed dead, and life, such as it was, continued. This January morning felt no different than 100 others. Elias had risen before dawn, stoked the fire, boiled coffee so strong it could strip paint. He'd checked his trap lines the day before, collected 3 prime marten pelts to add to his winter take. Now it was time for his quarterly supply run: flour, salt, tobacco, ammunition, the essentials that kept a man alive in the high country. He hitched his sturdy bay mare to the supply wagon, her breath steaming in the pre-dawn darkness. The ride to Timber Ridge took 4 hours in good weather, longer when the snow lay deep. Today the sky hung low and grey, pregnant with the promise of more snow. He'd need to make this quick, get in, get supplied, get back before the weather turned. The town appeared gradually through the trees, a scatter of wooden buildings along a single main street. Timber Ridge had grown since he'd first arrived years ago, back when Sarah was alive and they'd dreamed of ranching. Now it boasted a proper mercantile, a hotel, a saloon, even a small church. Progress, people called it. Elias called it noise. He drove straight to the rail station at the edge of town. The train came through twice weekly, bringing supplies from Helena and points east. Jacob Morrison, the station master, handled freight deliveries for locals. Good man, Jacob. Didn't ask unnecessary questions, didn't pry into why a man might choose mountains over company. The station platform was empty when Elias pulled up, unusual for a delivery day. The train had clearly come and gone. He could see the tracks it left in the snow, could smell the lingering coal smoke. But no one waited for freight, no bustle of activity, just silence and cold and the whistle of wind through the eaves. Then he saw her. She stood at the far end of the platform, small and still against the weathered wood of the station wall. At first glance she looked like a ghost, something his isolation-addled mind had conjured. White dress, pale skin, dark hair whipping in the wind. But ghosts didn't shiver. Ghosts didn't wrap thin arms around themselves, trying to hold in warmth that was already gone. Elias climbed down from the wagon, his boots crunching in the snow. As he moved closer, details resolved themselves into reality. She was young, maybe 25. The white dress was a wedding gown, torn at the hem and stained with travel. Her coat, too thin for Montana winter, hung open, one button missing. Her lips had gone blue, that dangerous shade that meant the cold was winning. But it was her eyes that stopped him. Dark eyes, huge in her pale face, filled with a fear so absolute it made his chest tighten. She looked at him like a cornered animal, like something that had run until it couldn't run anymore, and now waited for the inevitable end. "Ma'am?" His voice came out rusty from disuse. "You all right?" She didn't answer, just stared at him with those terrified eyes. Jacob appeared from the station office, heavy coat buttoned to his chin. "Elias, glad you're here. Been waiting on your freight." He glanced at the woman, lowered his voice. "She came in on the morning train. Wrong train near as I can figure. Keeps saying she needs to go to Copper Falls, but that train already left. Next one's not till Thursday." "She hurt?" Elias asked. "Won't say. Won't talk much at all, just stands there freezing." Jacob shook his head. "I offered to fetch the sheriff, but she near about, panicked. Don't know what to make of it." Elias studied the woman more carefully. Wedding dress meant she was supposed to be somewhere, meeting someone. Wrong train meant she'd made a mistake, or been forced to make one. The fear in her eyes meant she was running from something, not toward it. He'd seen that look before. In Sarah's eyes, when the pain had started and she'd known something was wrong. In the mirror, in those first months after the burial, when he'd been running from his own memories. "Ma'am," he tried again, softer this time. "You can't stay out here. Storm's coming. You'll freeze." She focused on him finally, really seeing him. Her lips moved, but no sound came out at first. Then, barely a whisper, "I have nowhere to go." 4 words that carried the weight of a broken world. Elias should have walked away, should have collected his supplies, climbed back on his wagon, and ridden home to his safe, silent solitude. He'd built those walls carefully over 5 years. Built them high and strong specifically to avoid moments like this, complications like this, other people's pain like this. But he couldn't. God help him, he couldn't. Maybe it was Sarah's voice in his head, reminding him how she'd always opened their door to anyone who needed help. Maybe it was the simple human decency his father had preached from his circuit rider's pulpit. Maybe it was just that this woman looked so utterly lost, and he remembered what lost felt like. "I have a cabin," he heard himself say. Hope flickered in those dark eyes, quickly suppressed, as if she'd learned not to trust hope. "I can't pay you. Didn't ask you to. You don't know anything about me." "Don't need to." She studied his face for a long moment, looking for something. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her, because she gave the smallest nod. "Thank you," she whispered. Jacob helped Elias load the supplies, while the woman she still hadn't offered a name waited by the wagon. The station master kept his voice low. "You sure about this, Elias? Woman in a wedding dress scared out of her mind? Won't give details? That's trouble looking for a place to land. Probably, Elias agreed. He secured the last crate, tied down the canvas cover. But I can't leave her here to freeze. Your funeral, Jacob said, but not unkindly. You need anything, you send word. Elias helped the woman onto the wagon seat. She moved stiffly, her hands clumsy with cold. He wrapped a spare blanket around her shoulders, and she clutched it gratefully. Up close, he could see the bruise on her cheek, fading but visible. Could see how her hands trembled, and not just from the temperature. They rode in silence. The woman stared straight ahead, occasionally glancing back over her shoulder as if expecting pursuit. Elias kept the mare at a steady pace, taking the mountain road with practiced ease. Snow began to fall, light at first, then heavier. By the time they reached the cabin, a full blizzard had settled in. He got her inside, built up the fire until the room glowed with warmth, found clean clothes that had been Sarah's, set them on the spare bed, put coffee on to boil, and sliced bread and cheese. The woman stood in the middle of the cabin, looking bewildered, as if kindness was a language she'd forgotten how to speak. There's a room there, Elias pointed. Door closes. You can rest, clean up, food will be ready when you are. She nodded slowly, took the clothes, paused at the threshold. My name is Anna, she said quietly. Anna Whitmore. Elias Brennan. Thank you, Mr. Brennan, for not leaving me there. Just, Elias is fine. She disappeared into the room. He heard water being poured, the rustle of fabric. When she emerged 20 minutes later, the wedding dress was gone, replaced by a simple dress that had once been Sarah's. Her dark hair was unpinned, falling past her shoulders. She looked younger without the fear, though shadows still haunted her eyes. They ate in awkward silence. Anna devoured the food like someone who hadn't eaten in days, then looked embarrassed by her appetite. Elias poured more coffee, pushed the bread closer. She needed to eat, needed warmth and rest and time. The wrong train, he said finally. Where were you supposed to go? Copper Falls. Her voice was steadier now, fed and warm. I was supposed to meet. She stopped, swallowed hard. It doesn't matter now. I can't go there. Why not? Fear flashed across her face again. Because the man waiting for me, I can't marry him. I won't. Elias waited, giving her space to continue or not. I got on the wrong train on purpose, Anna admitted. I panicked. I saw a chance to run and I took it. It was stupid. I have no plan, no money, no... Her voice broke. I'm sorry. You didn't sign up for this mess. Nobody signs up for the messes we end up in, Elias said quietly. We just deal with them best we can. She looked at him with something like wonder. You're very kind. Just practical. Storm's not letting up tonight. You'll stay here until it passes. After that, well, we'll figure that out after. Anna's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. I don't even know why you helped me. Elias looked into the fire, seeing Sarah's face in the flames like he always did. Because someone should have been there to help when my wife needed it, he said. And they weren't. So now I am. He showed her to the spare room, Sarah's sewing room, once upon a time. Clean bed, warm quilts, a small window looking out at the snow. Anna stood in the doorway holding a candle, looking lost again. You're safe here, Elias told her. Door locks from inside if it makes you feel better. But you're safe. I believe you, she said softly. He left her there, returned to the main room, banked the fire for the night, checked the doors and windows. Outside, the blizzard howled. Inside, the cabin creaked and settled, sounds he knew by heart. Through the thin wall, he heard Anna crying, soft, muffled sobs of someone trying hard not to be heard. Elias stood with his hand on the door, torn between respecting her privacy and offering comfort. In the end, privacy won. She'd cried enough for one night. They both had, over the years. He lay in his own bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what he'd just brought into his carefully ordered solitude. a runaway bride with secrets and fear in her eyes. Trouble, just like Jacob said. The smart thing would be to take her back to town once the storm cleared, let the sheriff sort it out. But he knew he wouldn't. Something about Anna Whitmore called to the part of him that still remembered how to care, how to protect. The part he'd thought died with Sarah. Outside, the wind screamed through the pines. Inside, two broken people tried to sleep, neither knowing that this chance meeting would change everything, that kindness would lead to danger, that mercy would demand courage, that a simple act of helping a stranger would unravel secrets dark enough to shake an entire territory. But that would come later. Tonight, there was only warmth and shelter and the temporary peace of survival. Sometimes that was enough. Sometimes that was everything. 3 days passed in the cabin while the blizzard raged outside. 3 days of careful coexistence, of learning each other's rhythms and boundaries. Anna helped with what she could, cooking, mending, keeping the fire fed. Elias noticed how she moved with quiet efficiency, how her hands were skilled despite their softness. This was no pampered city woman unused to work. She'd learned how to make herself useful, how to earn her keep. They spoke in fragments at first, small observations about the weather, requests for salt or wood, but gradually, like ice melting in spring, the silences became more comfortable. Anna asked about the pressed flowers in his journal when she found him looking at them one evening. Elias found himself talking about Sarah for the first time in years, not the death, not the grief, but the woman herself, her laugh, her stubbornness, the way she sang while cooking, always off-key. Anna listened without the pitying looks he'd grown to hate in town. She simply listened, and when he finished, she said, "She sounds like she made you happy." She did, Elias agreed. For a little while she did. The next morning, Anna offered her own story. They sat at the rough-hewn table, coffee steaming between them, and she finally opened the door she'd kept locked. "My real name is Anna Catherine Whitmore," she began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "My father is Marcus Whitmore. He owned a small mining claim near Silver Creek. Not much, but enough to live on. After my mother died, it was just the two of us." She stared into her coffee cup as if reading the future in its dark surface. "My mother died when I was 12. Fever. My father never recovered from it. He started drinking, then gambling. Within 5 years, he'd gambled away most of what we had. I tried to hold things together, but I was just a girl. What could I do?" Elias remained quiet, letting her find her way through the story. "2 years ago, my father made a deal. He needed money to cover his debts, and there was a man, Silas Garrett, who owned the largest copper mine in the territory. Garrett was expanding, buying up claims, consolidating power. My father's claim sat right in the middle of land Garrett wanted." Anna's jaw tightened. "So they made an arrangement. Garrett would forgive my father's gambling debts and buy the claim for a generous price. In exchange, I would marry Garrett. An old-fashioned arrangement, they called it. My father signed the contracts before I even knew about it." "He sold you," Elias said flatly. "He sold me," Anna agreed. "I was 23 years old and educated enough to know better, but what choice did I have? My father would have lost everything. We'd have been destitute. At least this way, he'd be taken care of. And Garrett, I'd never met him, but I thought perhaps it wouldn't be so terrible. Perhaps he'd be kind." She laughed bitterly. "I was a fool." The story came faster now, as if she needed to expel it like poison. She'd traveled west from Silver Creek, a week-long journey by train and stage. The wedding was scheduled for the day after her arrival in Copper Falls. She'd spent the journey trying to convince herself it would be bearable, that she could make a life with a stranger if it meant security and saving her father from ruin. Then, at the last stop before Copper Falls, Silas Garrett had boarded the train. "He came into my compartment without knocking," Anna said, her voice dropping. "Said he wanted to meet his bride, make sure the merchandise was satisfactory. Those were his words, merchandise. Elias felt his hands curl into fists. He was older than I expected, 50, maybe 55, cold eyes. When he smiled, it didn't reach them. He sat too close, put his hand on my knee, said I was prettier than my photograph, that I'd do well enough. Then he showed me a newspaper clipping he carried in his pocket. Anna pulled a folded piece of paper from her dress pocket. She'd kept it all this time, smoothed it on the table. The headline read, "Tragic accident claims life of mine owner's wife." His first wife, Anna explained. She died falling down the stairs. The article was sympathetic, poor bereaved husband, terrible accident. But Garrett watched my face when I read it, and he smiled, really smiled, for the first time. Then he leaned close and said, "Accidents happen to troublesome wives. You won't be troublesome, will you, Catherine?" The silence that followed was heavy as stone. "I knew then," Anna continued. "I knew he'd killed her, knew I was next if I didn't please him. And when we stopped at Timber Ridge for water, I heard him talking to one of his men outside my window. He said, 'Once the marriage is finalized, we'll have the claim. After that, wives are easy to dispose of. No one questions a grieving husband.' So you ran," Elias said. "So I ran, like a coward. I waited until they were distracted loading cargo, and I slipped off the train. I saw another train on the opposite platform, and just got on it. Didn't even know where it was going, just knew I had to get away." She looked up at him, eyes bright with unshed tears. "I thought I was being clever. I thought I'd have time to figure out a plan. Instead, I ended up stranded at a train station in the middle of nowhere, freezing to death in a wedding dress." "You're not a coward," Elias said firmly. "You're a survivor." Anna shook her head. "I'm a fugitive. Those contracts my father signed, they're legal. In the eyes of the law, I'm bound to marry Garrett. If he finds me, he can force me to honor the agreement. And if I refuse—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. "He won't find you here," Elias promised, though he wasn't sure he could keep that promise. A man like Garrett, with money and power, he'd have people searching, had probably started the moment he realized Anna was gone. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of her story settling between them. Finally, Elias stood. "You should know how to shoot," he said, "just in case." Over the next few days, he taught her how to load and aim his rifle, how to account for wind and distance, how to clean and care for a weapon. Anna proved a quick study, her hands steady despite her fear. She had determination. This woman, a core of steel wrapped in soft manners and educated speech. They were returning from target practice on the 5th day when Elias heard it, the sound of horses approaching. Not the random wandering of wild animals, but the purposeful movement of riders who knew where they were going. "Inside," he said quietly. "Now." Anna didn't argue. She recognized the tone, the sudden tension in his body. They made it into the cabin just as two men appeared through the trees. Elias stepped outside, closing the door behind him. The men were rough types, hired muscle rather than lawmen. Both wore heavy coats and carried rifles across their saddles. They reined in 20 feet from the cabin, studying him with calculating eyes. "Help you, gentlemen?" Elias kept his voice neutral, his hand near the pistol at his belt. The older of the two, a scarred man with a grey beard, spoke first. "Looking for something. Or someone, rather. A woman. Young, dark hair, probably scared out of her mind. She's run off from her intended, and he's offering good money for her return." "Haven't seen anyone matching that description," Elias lied smoothly. "I live alone up here. Don't get many visitors." The second man, younger with cruel eyes, smirked. "Funny. Station master in Timber Ridge said he saw you leave with a woman, said she was wearing a wedding dress, looked half frozen. Station master talks too much. So you admit it." The older man's hand moved to his rifle. "Where is she?" Elias's mind raced. He could deny it, but they clearly had information, could try to explain, but men like this weren't interested in explanations. Could fight, but 2 against 1 with Anna in the cabin meant she'd be caught in crossfire. "What's your business with her?" Elias asked, buying time. "Our business is the man who hired us, Silas Garrett. You know that name?" "Can't say I do." "Well, Mr. Garrett's a powerful man in these parts, owns most of the copper mines. And the woman you helped, she's his bride. Legally contracted. She ran out on their wedding, and he wants her back. Simple as that." "Doesn't sound like she wants to go back." The younger man laughed. "Don't matter what she wants. Contract's a contract. She's his property, legal-like." Elias felt rage building in his chest, but he kept his expression calm. "The law doesn't recognize property rights in women. Slavery's been over for 20 years. Marriage contract's different," the older man said. "You interfering with that makes you an accomplice. Could see jail time for harboring a runaway bride. So why don't you just hand her over? We'll be on our way. Nobody gets hurt." "And if I don't?" The men exchanged glances. "Then things get complicated," the younger one said. "And Mr. Garrett don't like complications. He's already put up wanted posters in every town from here to Helena. $500 for information leading to her return. That's a lot of money. Money that makes people cooperative. Or dead," the older man added casually, "depending on how uncooperative they get." Elias measured the distance between them, calculated odds. He was quick with a pistol, but not quick enough to take both men before one of them got a shot off. And even if he could, killing them would bring more searchers, more trouble. "I'll tell you what I told the station master," Elias said finally. "I helped a woman who was freezing, gave her shelter during the storm, but she's gone now, left yesterday, said she was heading to California. That's all I know." It was a weak lie, and they all knew it. The tracks in the snow, the smoke from the chimney, the general state of the cabin, all of it suggested ongoing occupation, not a departed guest. The older man studied him for a long moment. "You're lying," he said flatly, "and that's going to cause problems for you. But we're not unreasonable men. We'll give you until tomorrow morning to think it over. You hand her over peaceful like, there's $50 in it for you. You keep being stubborn, and we come back with more men. Your choice." They turned their horses, began riding back down the mountain, but the younger man called back over his shoulder, "Oh, and Mr. Garrett wanted us to mention the reward's gone up, $1,000 now. That's enough to make any man reconsider his principles." Elias watched until they disappeared into the trees, then turned and went back inside. Anna stood pressed against the far wall, her face pale. She'd heard everything. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I've brought this down on you. You should turn me in, take the money. I won't blame you." Elias crossed to her, put his hands on her shoulders. "Look at me," he said. When she raised her eyes, he continued, "I'm not turning you in. Not for $1,000, not for 10,000. You understand? But they'll come back. They'll bring more men. They'll let them come. This is my land, my home, and you're under my protection now. That means something." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Why? Why would you risk so much for someone you barely know?" Elias thought about Sarah, about the baby, about all the people who hadn't been there when he needed them most, thought about his father's sermons on doing what was right, even when it cost you, thought about the kind of man he wanted to be, even in isolation, even in grief. "Because someone should," he said simply, "because you're worth protecting. And because that man, Garrett, he doesn't get to own you. Nobody owns another person. I don't care what contracts say." Anna threw her arms around him, sobbing into his chest. Elias held her awkwardly at first, then more firmly. It had been so long since he'd held anyone, so long since he'd allowed himself to care. But standing there with this frightened woman in his arms, he felt something crack open in his chest. some wall he'd built carefully over 5 years, brick by heavy brick. He was involved now, truly involved. There was no going back to his safe solitude, his careful isolation. Anna Whitmore had blown into his life like that blizzard, and she'd changed everything. When her tears finally subsided, she pulled back, wiped her eyes. Elias looked at the door, at the darkening sky beyond. Now we prepare. If they're coming back with more men, we need to be ready. And we need to figure out a way to end this that doesn't get us both killed. Is there a way? There's always a way, Elias said with more confidence than he felt. We just have to find it. That night, they sat by the fire making plans. Tomorrow would bring decisions, possibly violence, but tonight there was warmth and the beginning of trust. Two people against the world, or at least against one powerful man and his hired guns. Anna fell asleep in the chair, exhausted by emotion. Elias covered her with a blanket and sat watching her sleep, this stranger who'd become his responsibility. His purpose, maybe. The first thing in 5 years that made him feel like something other than a ghost haunting his own life. Outside, the night grew colder. Somewhere down the mountain, men were planning their return, and somewhere further away, Silas Garrett waited for news of his runaway bride, patient as a spider in its web. The game had begun. Now they just had to survive it. Red returned 6 days later, his horse lathered and his face grim. They'd been on edge the entire time he was gone, expecting Garrett's men to show up in force at any moment. But the mountains had remained quiet, almost eerily so. Now, seeing Red's expression, Elias knew the news wasn't good. They gathered in the cabin, all 5 of them crowded around the table. Red accepted coffee gratefully, drank half the cup before speaking. "Found Dr. Brenner," he began. "Man's scared out of his wits, but he's got information. More than information, he's got proof." Red pulled a bundle of papers from inside his coat. Autopsy notes from Garrett's first wife. Brenner performed the examination himself, being the only doctor in Copper Falls at the time. Found traces of arsenic in her system. Not enough to be immediately obvious, but enough to be suspicious. Anna leaned forward. "Why didn't he report it?" He tried. Went to the sheriff, showed him the findings, but the sheriff was on Garrett's payroll. Threatened, Brenner said, if he made accusations against a respected businessman without absolute proof, he'd lose his medical license, might even have an accident himself. Red's jaw tightened. Brenner backed down, kept his notes hidden, and kept his mouth shut. Been living with that guilt ever since. "And now?" Elias asked. "Now, he says, he'll testify if we can guarantee his safety. He knows what he did was wrong, letting a murderer walk free. Says if this girl had the courage to run, least he can do is find the courage to speak up." Red looked at Anna with respect. "Your story inspired him, miss. Reminded him what being a doctor is supposed to mean." Anna's eyes filled with tears. "He'll really help us?" "He will. But there's complications." Red spread the papers on the table. Garrett's second wife, the one who disappeared before the wedding, Brenner found records of her too. She came to see him a week before she vanished. Said she was having second thoughts about the marriage, that Garrett frightened her. Brenner tried to counsel her, but she left. Never saw her again. Her body was found 3 months later in a ravine, ruled accidental fall. "But Brenner suspects otherwise," Tom said. "More than suspects." He examined the body. Found bruising consistent with being pushed, not falling. But again, no proof, and the sheriff closed the case quick. Red's expression darkened. "There's a pattern here. Garrett finds women who are vulnerable, family debts, difficult circumstances, offers them security through marriage. Once the legal ties are in place and he gets whatever property or business he's after, the wives become inconvenient. Then they have accidents." The room fell silent. Anna's face had gone pale, and Elias reached for her hand under the table. She gripped his fingers hard. "How many?" Anna whispered. How many has he killed? 3 that Brenner knows of for certain. Could be more before he moved to Copper Falls. Man's been doing this for 20 years at least. Red looked at her directly. You were right to run, miss. If you'd married him, you'd be dead within a year. Sooner, probably, once he secured your father's mining claim. Anna stood abruptly, walked to the window. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass, shoulders shaking. Elias started to rise, but Red gestured for him to wait. Let her process this, his eyes said. She needs a moment. When Anna finally turned back, her face was set with determination. We expose him, completely, not just to save myself, but to get justice for those other women. Their families deserve to know the truth. Agreed, Red said, but it won't be easy. Garrett's got powerful friends, judges, lawmen, businessmen. He's built an empire on murder and manipulation. Taking him down means taking down everyone who's helped him or looked the other way. Then that's what we do, Anna said firmly. Sam, who'd been quiet until now, spoke up. You're talking about going to war with one of the richest, most connected men in the territory. That's not a fight we win with guns. No, Red agreed. It's a fight we win with truth, and with the law, real law, not Garrett's bought and paid for version. He pulled out another paper. I sent word to a federal marshal in Helena. Man named Clayton Hayes. He's got a reputation for being clean, can't be bought, won't be intimidated. If we can present evidence to him, evidence that shows Garrett's crimes cross territorial lines, he'll have jurisdiction. Will he take it seriously? Elias asked. He will, if we do it right. We need Brenner's testimony, Anna's story, and any other evidence we can gather. Then we need to arrange a meeting on neutral ground, somewhere public enough that Garrett can't just have us all killed, but private enough to present our case. They spent the rest of the day planning. Brenner would compile all his medical records. Anna would write out her complete testimony, everything she'd seen and heard, dates and details. Red would coordinate with Marshal Hayes, arrange a meeting. The whole process would take weeks, maybe months. What about in the meantime? Tom asked. Garrett's not going to sit idle while we build a case against him. No, Red admitted. He's already making moves. Got wind of some new wanted posters going up. Rewards now $1,500. And he's bringing in a tracker man named Ezekiel Stone. Best there is, from what I hear. If Stone gets on your trail, he won't stop until he finds you. Elias felt ice in his stomach. A professional tracker changed everything. The cabin's remote location wouldn't protect them anymore. Then we move, he said. There's an old hunting lodge deeper in the mountains. Place I used to use years back. More remote, more defensible. Stone can track all he wants. Those mountains are a maze, even to locals. Anna looked at him with concern. You'd leave your home, after everything you've built here? Home's wherever you are, Elias said simply. The words surprised him as much as her, but they were true. Somewhere over these past days, his definition of home had shifted. It wasn't this cabin anymore, these walls. It was her. That evening, they began packing. Essential supplies, weapons, ammunition. Elias carefully wrapped Sarah's carved birds, placed them in a saddlebag. The leather journal with its pressed flowers, the few photographs he had, everything that mattered fit into surprisingly little space. Anna helped him, moving quietly through the cabin she'd come to know. At one point, she stopped in the doorway of Sarah's old sewing room where she'd been staying. It feels wrong, she said, like we're abandoning her. Elias came to stand beside her. Sarah's not here, Anna. She hasn't been for 5 years. What's here are memories, and those travel with me wherever I go. He pulled something from his pocket, the silver locket he'd given Anna. She still wore it, but now he opened it, showed her the tiny portraits inside. See, she's right here, always will be. Anna studied the miniature painting Sarah with her kind eyes, Elias younger and less weathered. She was beautiful. She was. But beauty fades, Anna. What made Sarah special was her spirit, Her kindness, the way she saw the best in people. He closed the locket gently. You have that same spirit, that same way of bringing light to dark places. It's part of why... He hesitated, then pressed forward. It's part of why I'm falling in love with you. The words hung in the air between them, huge and undeniable. Anna's eyes widened, filled with tears. Elias, she breathed. You don't have to say it back. I know this is fast. No, we've only known each other a short time. But these circumstances, they strip away pretense, make you see what matters. And you matter, Anna. You matter to me more than I ever thought anyone could again. She kissed him then, fierce and desperate, and full of all the words she couldn't quite say yet. He held her tight. This woman who'd crashed into his ordered life and turned everything sideways. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. I'm not there yet, Anna admitted. Not at love. But I'm falling, Elias. I'm falling fast, and it terrifies me because I've never felt anything like this before. That's enough, he assured her. More than enough. They finished packing as night fell. Tom and Sam would ride ahead to the lodge, make sure it was habitable. Red would continue coordinating with Marshal Hayes and Dr. Brenner. Elias and Anna would follow in 2 days, taking a roundabout route to throw off any potential trackers. Their last night in the cabin felt both sad and hopeful. Sad because Elias was leaving the place where he'd grieved, where he'd slowly pieced himself back together after Sarah's death. But hopeful because he was leaving it for someone who made him want to fully live again. They sat by the fire late into the night, not talking much, just being together. At some point, Anna's head drooped onto his shoulder, and she fell asleep. Elias held her carefully, watching the flames dance, thinking about the strange turns life could take. 5 years ago he'd have said he'd never love again, would have sworn his heart was too broken to mend. But here was Anna, sleeping trustingly against him, and here was his heart, beating hard and alive and full of feeling he'd thought were dead. Maybe that was the truth about grief. It didn't end, didn't disappear. But it could make room for other things. Joy could exist alongside sorrow. New love could coexist with old. The heart was bigger than he'd given it credit for, capable of holding more than he'd imagined. When Anna stirred hours later, confused and apologetic about falling asleep, Elias just smiled. Come on, he said gently. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. We both need rest. She hesitated at the door to her room, then turned back. Elias, thank you for choosing me. For choosing this. You could have played it safe, stayed alone. It would have been easier. Easier, he agreed, but not better, not even close. She smiled, that transformative smile that made everything worthwhile, and went to bed. Elias stayed by the fire a while longer, committing the cabin to memory. The shadows on the walls, the creak of the floorboards, the way the wind whistled through the eaves. This place had been his refuge, his prison, his penance. But it was time to leave it behind. Tomorrow they'd ride toward an uncertain future, toward danger and confrontation and legal battles that might take months to resolve. But they'd ride together, and that made all the difference. He finally banked the fire and went to his own bed. For the first time in 5 years, he didn't dream of Sarah's funeral. He dreamed of sunrise over new mountains, of Anna laughing, of a future he was finally ready to fight for. The ride to the hunting lodge took 3 days, through some of the most unforgiving terrain in the Bitterroots. Elias led them on paths he'd learned years ago, routes that didn't appear on any map. They traveled carefully, doubling back occasionally to confuse any potential tracker, wading through icy streams to break their scent trail. It was exhausting work, but necessary. Anna never complained. She'd become a capable rider over the past weeks, learning to read her horse's signals, to adjust her seat for rough terrain. More than that, she'd developed the quiet endurance of someone who understood survival wasn't about comfort. It was about putting one foot in front of the other until you reached safety. They made camp the first night in a natural shelter formed by fallen trees and an overhanging rock face. Elias built a small fire, barely enough for warmth, but not enough to be seen from a distance. They ate dried meat and hard biscuits, not speaking much, conserving energy for the next day's travel. But that night, wrapped in blankets against the cold, Anna spoke into the darkness. "Tell me about the lodge. What's it like?" Elias stared up at the stars visible through the pine branches. "Basic, 4 walls, a roof, a fireplace. Red and I built it maybe 15 years ago, back when we were both younger and stupider. Thought we'd have a base camp for winter, trapping up in the high country. Did it work? For a few years. Then Sarah came along, and I stopped going on those long expeditions. Needed to be home more." He paused. "After she died, I thought about going back to it, hiding even deeper in the mountains. But by then, I'd built the cabin in the valley, and it seemed like enough distance from the world. And now I'm glad it's there. It'll keep us safe while we figure out how to end this." Anna shifted closer to him, seeking warmth. "Elias, what happens if we can't prove Garrett's guilty? If Marshal Hayes won't take the case, or if Brenner backs out, or if... Then we find another way," he said firmly. "But Anna, we're going to win this. We have to believe that." "Why? Why do we have to believe it?" "Because the alternative is unacceptable. I won't let that man take you. I won't let him hurt you the way he hurt those other women. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, we'll find a way." She was quiet for a moment, then, "You'd really fight for me like that? Risk everything?" "I already am." She kissed him then, there in the darkness of their makeshift camp. It was different from their earlier kisses, deeper, more certain. When they pulled apart, she whispered against his lips, "I think I'm falling in love with you too." His heart, that organ he'd thought permanently damaged, swelled with something that felt dangerously like joy. "You think?" "I know," she corrected. It's hard to say it out loud. Makes it real. Makes it something I could lose." "We're not losing anything," Elias promised. "Not if I have anything to say about it." They held each other through the cold night, taking comfort in warmth and presence. Somewhere out there, Ezekiel Stone was probably already on their trail. Somewhere, Silas Garrett was plotting and scheming. But here now, there was just the two of them, and the stars above and the promise of tomorrow. The second day's travel was harder. They climbed steadily upward, into regions where snow lay year-round in the shadows. The air grew thin, making breathing labored. But the higher they climbed, the safer they'd be. Few men would follow this far into the wilderness unless they were truly determined. They reached a high pass just as the sun was setting, and Elias pointed down into the valley below. There, barely visible through the trees, sat a small structure. "The lodge," he said. "Another hour's ride." Tom and Sam had done good work. When they arrived, the lodge was warm, with a fire crackling and supplies stacked neatly. The older men greeted them with relief. "Thought maybe you'd run into trouble," Tom said. "Just being careful," Elias replied. He helped Anna down from her horse, and she swayed slightly, exhausted from the journey. "Let's get you inside." The lodge was exactly as he'd described, basic but solid. One large room with a stone fireplace, a loft above for sleeping, a small attached shed for supplies and animals. After the cabin, it felt primitive. But it was defensible, remote, and most importantly, unknown to anyone connected with Garrett. Over the next few days, they settled into a new routine. The men took turns standing watch, alert for any sign of pursuit. Anna continued working on her written testimony, adding details as she remembered them. Elias worked on fortifications, reinforcing weak points in the structure. But at night, when the work was done and the others had retired to the loft or the shed, Elias and Anna sat by the fire together. They talked about everything, childhoods, dreams, regrets. Anna described her mother, a gentle woman who'd loved books and wildflowers. Elias told stories of his father's circuit-riding ministry, traveling from town to town, bringing religion to the frontier. He used to say that faith wasn't about being certain, Elias remembered. It was about choosing to hope, even when hope seemed foolish. I didn't understand that when I was young, thought faith meant knowing all the answers. And now I think he was right. Hope is a choice. Every morning I could choose to believe Sarah's death was meaningless, that life is just suffering and loss. Or I could choose to believe that even in the worst circumstances there's possibility, purpose, maybe even grace. Anna leaned her head on his shoulder. You give me hope, Elias. You make me believe that maybe I'm not just a commodity to be traded or a problem to be eliminated. Maybe I'm actually worth something. You're worth everything, he said fiercely. Don't ever doubt that. One evening, exactly 2 weeks after they'd arrived at the lodge, Red appeared with news. He'd met with Marshal Hayes, presented Brenner's evidence. The marshal was interested, very interested. He wanted to meet with Anna, hear her testimony directly, and he wanted to do it officially, with documentation and witnesses. He's proposing a formal hearing, Red explained. Public record, legal framework. It won't be a trial, Garrett hasn't been charged with anything yet, but it'll be an official investigation. If Anna's testimony corroborates Brenner's evidence, Hayes can arrest Garrett and bring formal charges. When? Anna asked, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. 3 weeks. Gives us time to prepare, gives Brenner time to organize all his medical records. Hayes is setting it up in Helena, at the territorial courthouse. Public location, too many witnesses for Garrett to try anything violent. He could send lawyers instead, Sam pointed out. Discredit Anna's testimony, claim she's lying to get out of a legal contract. He could try, Red agreed, but Hayes is smart. He's structuring this as an investigation into suspicious deaths, not as a contract dispute. Anna's testimony is just one piece. Combined with Brenner's medical evidence and the pattern of dead wives, it paints a pretty clear picture. Anna looked at Elias, seeking reassurance. He took her hand. We'll be ready, he promised. Whatever Garrett throws at us, we'll be ready. That night, unable to sleep, Elias walked outside. The stars were impossibly bright at this altitude, the Milky Way a river of light across the black sky. He thought about the hearing, about putting Anna in a room with her abuser, even in a controlled setting. The thought made his hands clench into fists. Anna joined him, wrapped in a blanket. Can't sleep either, just thinking. About the hearing? About how much I want to kill Silas Garrett with my bare hands, Elias admitted. Which isn't helpful or productive, but it's the truth. Anna took his clenched fist, gently uncurled his fingers, laced hers through them. I know. But we can't beat him with violence. He's got more men, more guns, more resources. We beat him by exposing the truth, by making sure everyone knows what kind of monster he is. I know you're right. Doesn't make it easier. Nothing about this is easy. But Elias, we're going to win. I feel it. For the first time since I ran, I actually believe we might win. He pulled her close, held her against the cold. Above them the stars wheeled on their eternal paths. Below them, in towns and cities, people lived their ordinary lives, unaware of the small drama playing out in these mountains. But up here, in the thin air and vast silence, 2 people were finding their courage, finding each other. 3 weeks, Anna said. Then we face him. Then we face him, Elias agreed. But not alone. Never alone. They stood there until the cold drove them inside, but Elias felt warmer than he had in years. Not from the fire, but from the certainty growing in his chest. Whatever happened at that hearing, whatever Garrett tried, they would face it together. And somehow, that made even impossible odds feel manageable. The weeks before the hearing passed, in careful preparation, Anna rehearsed her testimony until she could recite it in her sleep. Brenner sent detailed medical records via Red's careful courier system. Marshal Hayes sent reassuring messages that everything was progressing according to plan. They allowed themselves to believe, cautiously, that justice might actually prevail. Then, one evening, everything changed. Anna was in the corner of the lodge, attempting to repair the torn wedding dress. Not to wear it again, but to salvage the fabric for something practical, perhaps a quilt or new curtains. The dress had been expensive once, fine white silk that deserved better than to rot in a corner. As she worked at the hem, trying to remove the dried mud stains, she felt something hard caught in the lining. A lump she hadn't noticed before, sewn into the fabric. Curious, she worked at the seam with her knife, carefully opening the stitching. A small object fell into her palm. A cameo brooch, delicate and old, the kind wealthy women wore. The carved profile showed a woman's face in ivory against a dark background. Beautiful work, clearly valuable. But it was the back that made Anna's blood run cold. Engraved in tiny script, ECG, forever loved, never forgotten. Her hands began to tremble. ECG. Those weren't random initials. They were her mother's initials. Elizabeth Catherine Garrett. Garrett. The room spun. Anna gripped the edge of the table, trying to breathe, trying to make sense of what she was holding. Her mother's maiden name had been Whitmore, same as her father's surname. That's what she'd always been told. Elizabeth Whitmore, from a family of modest means, nothing remarkable. But this brooch said otherwise. Elias noticed her distress immediately. Anna, what's wrong? She couldn't speak. Just held out the brooch with shaking hands. He took it, examined it, read the inscription. His face went pale. Garrett? My mother, Anna whispered. Her initials, ECG, Elizabeth Catherine Garrett. The silence that followed was deafening. Tom and Sam, who'd been cleaning rifles in the corner, stopped and stared. Red, who'd just arrived with supplies, froze in the doorway. Your mother's maiden name was Garrett, Elias said slowly, working through the implications. No. I thought it was Whitmore. That's what my father always told me. Elizabeth Whitmore from Silver Creek, daughter of a merchant family. Anna's voice rose with each word, panic creeping in. But this says Garrett, ECG. Why would my mother have Garrett as her initial unless that was her real family name? Red finished grimly. Anna, do you know anything about your mother's family? Any relatives she mentioned? Anna sank into a chair, mind racing through memories. She never talked about them. I asked a few times when I was little, and she'd get this look scared and sad at the same time. She'd say her family was gone, that my father and I were all she needed. I thought maybe they'd died, or there'd been some falling out. But she made me promise, made me swear that I'd never try to find them. Why? Elias asked gently. She said. Anna closed her eyes, trying to remember her mother's exact words. She said there were people in the world who looked normal on the outside, but were rotten inside. That some families were poisonous. That I should stay far away from anyone with her old name. But she never told me what that name was. I was 12 when she died. I thought she was just being protective, maybe delusional from the fever. Red moved closer, his expression serious. Anna, how old was your mother when she married your father? 16. They eloped. My father used to say it was romantic. They ran away together, started fresh. Or she was running from something, Tom said quietly. Running from family. The pieces were falling into place, each one more horrifying than the last. Anna felt like she was drowning. Silas Garrett, she said hollowly. He would have been what? In his 30s when my mother was a teenager? If she was his sister. We don't know that for certain, Elias said, but his voice lacked conviction. The brooch was in my mother's possession. It has Garrett initials. She ran away from her family at 16 and never looked back, never told me anything about them. Anna looked up at Elias, tears streaming down her face. Silas Garrett is my uncle, my mother's brother. That's why he was so determined to marry me, Not just for the mining claims, but because I'm family, his sister's daughter." The room erupted in shocked exclamations, but Anna barely heard them. Her mind was reeling through every interaction with Garrett, seeing them all in this new, sickening light. The way he'd looked at her on the train, not just with cruelty but with possessiveness. The way he'd called her Catherine, instead of Anna using her middle name, the name that matched her mother's. "He knew," she said, her voice breaking. "From the beginning he knew exactly who I was. When my father contacted him about the arrangement, Garrett must have realized this was Elizabeth's daughter, his sister's child, and he still wanted to marry me, his own niece." Elias knelt in front of her, took her hands. "Anna, listen to me. This changes things." "Changes things?" She laughed bitterly. "This changes everything. The marriage contract, it's not just immoral, it's illegal. You can't marry your niece, not even in Nevada. The whole agreement is void, based on consanguinity alone." "That's good," Red said carefully. "That's actually very good. It means you have legal standing to refuse, no matter what your father signed. But it also means Anna couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice the full horror of what Garrett had intended. Tom did it for her. It means Garrett planned to marry his own niece, knowing full well the blood relation. That's not just murder we can charge him with, that's attempted incest, conspiracy, fraud." Anna stood abruptly, paced the room. "My father. Did he know? When he contacted Garrett, when he arranged the marriage, did my father know I was related to him?" "We need to find out," Elias said. "How? My father's in Nevada. Even if we could reach him, would he tell the truth? He sold me, Elias. He sold his own daughter to her uncle. What kind of man?" Her voice broke completely. Elias pulled her into his arms, held her while she sobbed. Over her head, he met Red's eyes. The older man's expression was grim. "This gives us more ammunition against Garrett," Red said. "But it also makes Anna's testimony more complicated. Defense lawyers will claim she's making it up, that she found this brooch and concocted a story. Then we prove it," Elias said fiercely. "There must be records, birth certificates, family documents, something that shows Elizabeth Garrett married Marcus Whitmore." "I'll send word to Brenner," Red said. "Ask him to research Garrett family history. If Elizabeth was Silas's sister, there will be documentation, census records at least." Anna pulled back from Elias's embrace, wiped her eyes. "I need to see my father. I need to know if he knew, if he sold me to his own brother-in-law knowing she couldn't finish." "After the hearing," Elias said firmly, "we deal with Garrett first, then we confront your father." "Why did she run?" Anna asked, not really expecting an answer. "My mother, why did she run from her family? What did Silas do to make her so afraid that she never went back, never even told me her real name?" Nobody answered, because they all knew. Garrett was a monster who killed wives and manipulated women. If his own sister had fled at 16, terrified enough to change her name and hide forever, it meant his cruelty went back decades. Meant Elizabeth had seen or experienced something so terrible she'd rather live in poverty with a gambling addict than ever contact her wealthy family again. She was protecting me, Anna realized. By not telling me, by making me promise never to look for her family, she was keeping me away from Silas. And then my father, that bastard, he contacted them anyway. Used me to... She pressed her fist against her mouth, fighting nausea. The next hours passed in grim activity. Red rode out immediately to send messages to Brenner about researching family records, to Marshal Hayes about this new development. Tom and Sam discussed the legal implications, how this changed their strategy for the hearing. Elias stayed with Anna. She sat clutching the cameo brooch, staring at the carved profile as if it could give her answers. "I look like her," Anna said quietly. "People used to say it all the time. I have her eyes, her hair. When Garrett saw me on that train, he must have seen Elizabeth, his sister who escaped him, and he thought he could reclaim her through me. But he can't, Elias said firmly. You're not your mother, and you're not his property. This revelation, as painful as it is, it's our strongest weapon against him. Is it? Or will people just see me as tainted, the product of a family of murderers and abusers? You're not responsible for your blood relations. You're responsible for your own choices, and every choice you've made has been brave and good. Anna looked at him. This man who'd taken her in when she was lost, who'd protected her despite the cost, who'd somehow fallen in love with her despite all her complications. What if there's something wrong with me? Some inherited sickness from the Garrett family? Then we deal with it together. But Anna, I don't believe that. You're nothing like Silas Garrett. You could have stayed, could have gone through with the marriage for security. Instead, you ran. You risked everything for freedom, for safety, for the chance to be yourself. That takes a strength he'll never understand. She leaned against him, exhausted by revelation and emotion. I'm scared, Elias, not just of Garrett, but of what this means. My whole life, everything I thought I knew about my mother, my family, it was built on lies. Not lies. Protection. Your mother loved you enough to hide the truth, to keep you safe from a man who would have corrupted or destroyed you. That's not a lie, that's sacrifice. They sat together as darkness fell outside. The fire crackled, wind howled through the high peaks. And, in Anna's hand, the cameo brooch caught the firelight, its carved face serene despite the violence and pain it represented. 3 weeks until the hearing, she said finally. We'll expose him, not just for what he tried to do to me, but for what he did to my mother, for all the women he's hurt. I won't let his sins define me, but I'll damn sure make sure everyone knows what he is. Elias kissed her forehead. That's my girl. I'm falling in love with you, she said suddenly, fiercely. Not because you're protecting me, or because I need you, though both those things are true, but because you see me. The real me, not the scared bride or the runaway or Garrett's niece, just me, Anna, and you love me anyway. I love you, especially, Elias corrected. Everything you are, everything you've survived, it makes you who you are, and who you are is remarkable. They held each other as the night deepened. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more revelations perhaps. But tonight there was understanding and acceptance. Love, growing stronger in the face of truth. The cameo brooch lay on the table, silent witness to generational pain. But beside it sat Elias's carved birds, symbols of beauty created from simple wood and patience. Both existed in the same space, pain and hope, past and future. Anna had a choice about which one would define her, and she was choosing hope. The 3 weeks before the hearing passed in a blur of preparation and anxiety. Red returned from his courier, runs with news that shook everything they thought they knew. Dr. Brenner had found the records. Elizabeth Catherine Garrett, born 1839, youngest child of the wealthy Garrett family of Copper Falls, disappeared in 1855 at age 16, presumed dead by the family. A small funeral had been held, though no body was ever found. The family had mourned publicly, while privately. According to old newspaper accounts, there were whispers of scandal. But there was more. Census records showed that Silas Garrett, born 1832, had been appointed Elizabeth's legal guardian after their parents died in 1854. He'd been 22, she 14. 1 year later, she vanished. She was running from him specifically, Red explained, spreading the documents on the table. Not just family from Silas himself. He had legal control over her, and she chose to be declared dead rather than live under his authority. Anna stared at the records, her mother's name written in formal script on yellowed paper. What did he do to her? What could be so terrible that she'd rather be dead? Nobody answered, because the answer was in Garrett's subsequent behavior, the dead wives, the pattern of control and murder. Whatever he'd done to young Elizabeth, it had been bad enough that she'd fled and never looked back. Marshal Hayes sent word that he'd received all the documentation. The consanguinity issue alone was enough to void any marriage contract. Combined with Brenner's evidence about the murdered wives, they had a case strong enough to arrest Garrett, but Hayes wanted to do it right. Public hearing, multiple witnesses, documented testimony. He wanted it so airtight that no amount of money or influence could get Garrett free. As the hearing date approached, Elias became increasingly protective. He taught Anna to shoot with deadly accuracy, made her practice until she could hit targets at 50 yards, taught her knife work, hand-to-hand combat basics. "I don't want you helpless if something goes wrong," he explained after one particularly intense training session. "You think Garrett will try something at the hearing, with Marshal Hayes and federal authority present? I think desperate men do desperate things, and we're about to destroy his life, his reputation, everything he's built. That makes him very desperate." Anna had changed over the months since the train station. The scared, freezing woman in a torn wedding dress was gone. In her place stood someone harder, more certain. She moved with confidence now, spoke with authority. The trauma hadn't broken her, it had forged her into something stronger. 1 week before they were due to leave for Helena, Elias made a decision. He retrieved something from his personal belongings, a small box he'd been carrying since leaving the cabin. "I made something for you," he said, handing it to Anna. Inside was a simple gold band, hand-forged. Beside it, a matching band for him. The craftsmanship was excellent, smooth, perfectly sized, beautiful in its simplicity. "Elias," Anna breathed. "I know we talked about marriage as a legal strategy," he said carefully, "a way to void Garrett's contract. But Anna, I want to marry you because I love you. Because I want to spend my life with you, not as an arrangement or necessity, but as a choice." Tears streamed down her face. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, absolutely yes. There's no preacher here," Elias continued. "But Red was saying that in Montana territory, couples can marry by declaration. If we pledge ourselves to each other before witnesses and file the proper paperwork, it's legal. When? Before we leave for Helena. I want you as my wife before we face Garrett. Want him to know you're claimed, protected, mine." He paused. "If that's what you want, it's exactly what I want." They married 3 days before the journey to Helena, in a simple ceremony before Red, Tom, and Sam. No fancy dress, no elaborate ritual, just 2 people standing before their friends, pledging their lives to each other with simple, honest words. "I promise to stand with you," Elias said, sliding the gold band onto Anna's finger, "in whatever comes, to protect you, cherish you, see you as you truly are, to build a life with you built on truth and respect and love." Anna's voice shook but didn't break. "I promise to trust you with my heart, even though hearts can be broken, to face the world beside you, not behind you, to honor the past you carry and the future we'll build together, to love you, Elias Brennan, until my last breath." Red pronounced them married by the authority vested in him as a citizen of Montana territory. It was rough and informal and absolutely perfect. That night, in the privacy of their shared space for the first time as husband and wife, Elias held Anna close. "I never thought I'd do this again," he admitted. "Never thought I'd feel ready to make these promises after losing Sarah." "Do you feel guilty?" Anna asked quietly. "For moving on?" "No, not anymore. I think Sarah would be happy I found you. She'd like that I'm living again instead of just existing." He kissed Anna's forehead. "And I think your mother would be proud of you. For running, for fighting back, for refusing to let Garrett define your life." Anna touched the gold band on her finger, still getting used to the weight. "Tomorrow we leave for Helena. Tomorrow it all becomes real. It's already real, but tomorrow we make it legal, documented, undeniable. We make sure Garrett can never touch you again." The journey to Helena took 4 days. They traveled with Red, Tom, and Sam, plus 2 additional men Marshal Hayes had sent as escorts, federal deputies who'd ensure their safe arrival. The presence of law enforcement made the trip feel both safer and more ominous. This was really happening. No more preparation, no more delay. Helena sprawled larger than any town Anna had seen since leaving Silver Creek. Proper streets, brick buildings, the territorial courthouse prominent on the main square. People everywhere, miners, merchants, families. The bustle of civilization after months in the mountains felt overwhelming. Marshal Hayes met them at the hotel he'd secured. He was a tall man in his 50s, with iron-grey hair and eyes that missed nothing. He assessed Anna carefully when introduced. "Mrs. Brennan," he said, using her new married name. "I've read your testimony. It's compelling. Dr. Brenner's evidence corroborates everything you've said. Tomorrow, we'll present all of it before a territorial judge. If things go as I expect, Garrett will be arrested before sunset." "You think it'll be that straightforward?" Elias asked. "No," Hayes said honestly. "Garrett's lawyers are already here, 3 of them, best money can buy. They'll argue that Anna's testimony is fabricated, that she invented the family connection to escape a legal obligation, that she's being manipulated by you, Mr. Brennan. They'll try to paint her as an unreliable, hysterical woman, and you as a mountain man who seduced an innocent girl." Anna's jaw tightened. "Let them try. I'm not the scared bride anymore. I know who I am and what I saw, and the evidence doesn't lie." Hayes smiled slightly. "Good. That's the spirit we need. But Mrs. Brennan Garrett will be in that courtroom. You'll have to face him directly, answer questions while he's watching." "Can you do that?" "I have to. For the women he killed. For my mother, who spent her whole life hiding from him. For any future women he might target. Yes, Marshal, I can do it." That evening, Dr. Brenner arrived at their hotel. He was a small man, perhaps 60, with gentle eyes and hands that trembled slightly. He embraced Anna like she was family. "I'm so sorry," he said. "Sorry I didn't speak up sooner. Sorry it took your courage to shame me into mine. But thank you for giving me the chance to make this right." Anna held his hands. "You're speaking up now. That's what matters." They reviewed strategy late into the night. Brenner would present medical evidence first, the autopsy reports, the suspicious circumstances. Anna would testify next, providing context and personal witness. Then Hayes would present the genealogical research, proving the familial relationship. Finally, character witnesses would describe Garrett's reputation, his business practices, his treatment of women. "It's a strong case," Hayes assured them. "Strongest I've built in years. But I need you both to understand. Garrett won't go quietly. He'll fight with every resource he has. Tomorrow might get ugly." "We're ready," Elias said, his hand finding Anna's. That night, lying in the hotel bed, neither could sleep. Anna kept rehearsing her testimony, running through answers to potential questions. Elias held her, offering silent support. "I'm terrified," she finally admitted. "Not of testifying, of seeing him, of being in the same room with the man who wanted to." She couldn't finish. "He can't hurt you now. You're protected by law, by me, by everyone who knows the truth. He's just a man, Anna, a cruel, twisted man, but just a man, and tomorrow we destroy him." "Promise me something," Anna said. "If things go wrong tomorrow, if somehow he gets away with it, promise you won't do anything rash. Don't throw your life away trying to kill him." Elias was quiet for a long moment. "I promise I'll try to do things the legal way. But Anna, if that man comes anywhere near you with intent to harm, legal consequences be damned. I'll protect you. Always." She kissed him then, fierce and desperate, trying to memorize the feeling of safety, of being loved. Tomorrow would bring confrontation and truth. Tonight, they had each other. Morning came too soon. Anna dressed carefully in a simple but dignified dress, dark blue, modest, respectable. the kind of outfit a wronged woman should wear. She pinned her hair up, added the cameo brooch at her throat. Let Garrett see it. Let him know she'd discovered the truth. Elias wore his best suit, cleaned and pressed. He strapped his pistol to his hip. Hayes had given special permission for him to be armed. Given the circumstances, Red, Tom and Sam would be in the courtroom too, spreading themselves strategically through the gallery. As they walked to the courthouse, Anna's hand in Elias's, she felt surprisingly calm. All the fear, all the preparation, it was coming down to this moment. Truth against lies. Justice against corruption. One woman's voice against a powerful man's empire. The courthouse steps loomed before them. A crowd had gathered, word had spread about the hearing, about the accusations. People wanted to see justice done, or maybe just wanted the spectacle. Anna held her head high, didn't look away from the stairs. At the top of the steps she paused and turned to Elias. Whatever happens in there, thank you, for believing me, for protecting me, for loving me. You saved my life in every way that matters. You saved mine too, he replied. Now, let's go finish this. They walked through the courthouse doors together into the marble halls of territorial justice, ready to face the man who'd haunted Anna's nightmares, ready to speak truth to power, ready, finally, to be free. Thornton tried several more lines of attack, but Anna held firm. She answered every question with calm certainty, never wavering, never backing down. By the time Hayes redirected, building back any ground Thornton had tried to take, the entire courtroom could feel the tide turning. Judge Blackwood called a recess. In the hallway outside, Anna collapsed against Elias, shaking with delayed reaction. "You were magnificent," he whispered against her hair. "Absolutely magnificent." "He looked at me like he wanted to kill me," she said. "Right there in open court. Let him look. He can't touch you now." When they reconvened, Hayes called his final witnesses. People from Copper Falls, who'd known the dead wives, who testified to their fear of Garrett in the weeks before they died. A bank manager who detailed how Garrett had acquired property immediately following each wife's death. A lawyer who'd helped prepare marriage contracts, including Anna's, and testified that Garrett had specifically requested language making the agreements irrevocable under any circumstances. "Didn't that strike you as unusual?" Hayes asked. "At the time, I thought he was just being thorough," the lawyer admitted. "Now, knowing what I know, it looks like he was making sure the women couldn't escape." Finally, Hayes rested his case. The evidence lay heavy in the courtroom, medical reports, documents, testimony. Impossible to dismiss, impossible to explain away. Thornton stood for closing arguments. "Your Honor, this is a case built on circumstantial evidence and the testimony of a woman who admittedly fled her legal obligations. Yes, there were deaths. Yes, they were tragic, but tragedy doesn't equal murder. My client is a businessman who had the misfortune to lose 3 wives. That makes him unlucky, not criminal." "What about the family relationship?" Judge Blackwood asked sharply. "The evidence that Mrs. Brennan is his niece?" "We don't dispute the genealogical evidence, but we maintain my client was unaware of this connection. He acted in good faith, believing Miss Whitmore was simply the daughter of a business associate. When he learned the truth, which he claims was only recently, he immediately withdrew any marriage proposals." "That's a lie," Anna called out before she could stop herself. Blackwood's gavel cracked. "Mrs. Brennan, control yourself." But the damage was done to Thornton's narrative. If Garrett had only recently learned of the relationship, why had he sent bounty hunters? Why the obsessive pursuit? Hayes stood for rebuttal. "Your Honor, the pattern is clear. Silas Garrett is a predator who has operated with impunity for decades because he's rich, because he's connected, because people like Dr. Brenner were too afraid to speak up. But today, truth speaks. Today, justice demands an answer. I ask that you issue a warrant for Garrett's arrest on 3 counts of murder, conspiracy to commit illegal marriage, and fraud." Judge Blackwood looked at the assembled evidence, at Anna, at Garrett. Her face was unreadable. "This court will recess for 1 hour, while I review the evidence and prepare my ruling." The hour felt like days. Anna, Elias, and their supporters gathered in a side room. Red brought coffee that no one drank. Tom and Sam stood guard at the door. Dr. Brenner sat with his head in his hands, exhausted by his testimony. "Whatever happens," Anna said to all of them, "thank you for standing with me, for believing me when it would have been easier not to." "Nothing easy about you, girl," Red said with a slight smile. "But everything worthwhile rarely is." Marshal Hayes appeared at the door. "Judge is ready." They filed back into the courtroom. The crowd had grown even larger, word having spread through Helena about the dramatic testimony. Anna took her seat, Elias's hand finding hers under the table. Judge Blackwood entered, her expression grave. Everyone stood until she sat, then waited in breathless silence. "This court has reviewed all evidence presented," she began. "The testimony of Dr. Brenner, corroborated by medical records, the genealogical proof of family relationship, the testimony of Mrs. Anna Brennan, which I found credible and compelling, the pattern of suspicious deaths surrounding Mr. Garrett." She paused, and in that pause, Anna felt her entire future hanging. "The evidence is substantial and disturbing. It suggests a pattern of predatory behavior spanning decades. While some elements are circumstantial, taken together they create a picture that demands further investigation through formal trial." Blackwood looked directly at Garrett. "Therefore, I am issuing a warrant for the arrest of Silas Garrett on 3 counts of murder in the first degree, 1 count of conspiracy to commit illegal marriage, and multiple counts of fraud. Bail is denied given the flight risk and severity of charges. Marshal Hayes, take him into custody." The courtroom exploded. Garrett lunged to his feet, face contorted with rage. "This is a travesty. That woman is a liar and a whore. I'll see you all destroyed." Federal deputies moved in quickly, but Garrett wasn't done. He pointed at Anna, his finger shaking with fury. "You're nothing, just like your mother, worthless, ungrateful trash. Elizabeth should have died when she ran. I would have made her something, given her purpose. Instead, she threw it away for poverty and mediocrity." "That's enough," Hayes commanded. But Garrett kept shouting as the deputies grabbed his arms. "I should have killed you on that train. Should have done it the moment I saw Elizabeth's face looking back at me. You're an abomination, a mistake that should never have existed." They dragged him toward the door, but he twisted back one last time. "This isn't over, Catherine. You think you've won? You think this changes anything? I'll get out. I have lawyers, money, influence, and when I do—" Anna stood, her voice cutting through his threats like a blade. "My name is Anna, not Catherine, not your niece, not your property. I'm Anna Brennan, and I'm the woman who destroyed you. Remember that in whatever cell they put you in. Remember that a woman you tried to own stood up and buried you with nothing but truth." Garrett's face went purple. He lunged toward her, breaking free from one deputy. Elias was already moving, putting himself between Garrett and Anna. For one terrible moment, violence hung in the air, Garrett's hands reaching, Elias's hand on his pistol. Then Hayes was there, slamming Garrett back against the wall. "That's assault in open court. Congratulations, Garrett. You just added another charge." They hauled him out, still screaming threats. The courtroom buzzed with shocked conversation. Judge Blackwood gavelled for order but seemed shaken by Garrett's outburst. "The defendant has shown his true character," she said when quiet finally returned. "Any doubts I had about these charges have been erased by his own words. This hearing is concluded. Marshal Hayes, ensure Mr. Fynes of the Mushel term, ensure Mr. of the Mushel dine. Garrett is secured in the territorial prison pending trial. Mrs. Brennan," she looked at Anna with something like admiration, "you are free from any legal obligation to that man. The marriage contract is void. You have your life back." Anna couldn't speak, could only nod as tears streamed down her face. They walked out of the courthouse into afternoon sunshine. A crowd had gathered outside, and when they saw Anna, they applauded. Someone started cheering. Soon the whole street was celebrating the triumph of justice, of courage, of one woman's stand against power. Red clapped Elias on the back. "You picked a fighter, my friend." "She picked herself," Elias replied, looking at Anna with undisguised love. "I just had the good sense to follow." Anna looked at the courthouse, at the federal building where Garrett was now imprisoned, at the people celebrating in the street. Months ago she'd been lost and freezing at a train station, certain her life was over. Now she stood free, legally married to a man she loved, with the monster who'd haunted her locked away. "It's really over," she whispered. "The hearing is," Elias said. "But Anna, our life together, that's just beginning." She smiled through her tears, and it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. 6 months later, spring had fully arrived in the Bitterroot Mountains. Snow melted to reveal wildflowers, columbine and lupine, and Indian paintbrush carpeting the meadows in riots of color. The hunting lodge had been transformed over the winter months into a proper home, with glass windows, an expanded loft, and even a small addition that would serve as a nursery come autumn. Anna stood in the doorway, one hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly, watching Elias work in the garden. He'd planted vegetables in neat rows, was building a fence to keep out the deer. The simple domesticity of it made her smile. This man, who'd once lived in complete isolation, was now planning for a family, for a future filled with noise and life and love. The trial had lasted 3 weeks. Garrett's expensive lawyers had fought hard, but the evidence was overwhelming. 3 counts of murder, guilty. Conspiracy, guilty. Fraud, guilty. The judge had sentenced him to hang, though appeals would likely delay the execution for years. It didn't matter. He was locked away, powerless, and would never hurt another woman. The verdict had brought other women forward, victims who'd survived encounters with Garrett, families of women who'd disappeared under suspicious circumstances. The investigation had expanded beyond anything Hayes had initially imagined. It turned out Silas Garrett's empire had been built on decades of abuse, theft, and murder. His business associates were being investigated, his property seized. Everything he'd built was crumbling, just as it should. Dr. Brenner had been vindicated and celebrated for his courage in testifying. He'd moved to Helena, set up a practice helping the poor, found purpose in service. He wrote to Anna regularly, and his letters always included the same line: "You saved my soul when you saved your own. Thank you." Anna's father had never responded to the letter she'd sent. She'd written him after the trial, explaining everything, the truth about her mother's family, about Garrett's crimes, about what would have happened if she'd gone through with the marriage. She'd asked if he'd known about the family connection, if he'd understood what he was doing when he arranged the marriage. Silence had been his answer. Maybe guilt kept him quiet, or shame. Maybe he simply didn't care. Either way, Anna had made peace with never hearing from him. Some relationships couldn't be salvaged, and that was all right. She had a new family, now Elias, Red, Tom, Sam, people who'd chosen her, who'd stood with her when blood family had failed. Elias looked up from his work, caught her watching, smiled. 6 months of marriage, and that smile still made her heart race. He set down his tools and walked over, pulled her close. "You should be resting," he said, kissing her forehead. "I've been resting all morning. Any more rest and I'll go mad." She leaned into him, felt his solid warmth. "I was thinking about the cabin. Your old cabin in the valley. What about it? Do you miss it? Would you rather be there than here?" Elias considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I miss the familiar, the specific creaks of those floorboards, the way morning light came through the kitchen window. But Anna, that cabin was where I went to hide from life. This," he gestured at the lodge, the garden, the mountains around them. "This is where I'm learning to live again. No, I don't miss it. This is home now." She smiled, relieved. They'd talked about maybe returning to the valley eventually, rebuilding there. But the lodge felt right to both of them. Isolated enough for peace, but not so remote they were completely cut off. Red visited weekly. Tom and Sam had built their own small cabins within a few miles. They had community here, safety, space to breathe. I started writing it all down, Anna said. Our story. For the baby, so they'll know how we met, how we survived. Is that strange? Not strange at all, important even. They should know their history, the hard parts and the beautiful parts. He placed his hand over hers on her belly. They should know their mother is the bravest person I've ever met. And their father is the kindest, Anna countered. The man who saw a stranger freezing at a train station and decided to help, even though it cost him everything he'd built. Didn't cost me, gave me everything that matters. They stood like that for a long moment, peaceful and content. Then Anna pulled back slightly, her expression turning serious. I'm afraid sometimes, she admitted. Afraid I'll be like him, like Garrett. That there's something twisted in my blood that will come out in our child. You're nothing like him. But what if, Anna? Elias cupped her face in his hands, made her meet his eyes. Listen to me. You're not defined by who your uncle was, any more than you're defined by your father's betrayal or your mother's fear. You're defined by your choices, and every choice you've made has been brave and good and right. Our child will have your courage and your kindness. That's the legacy you're passing on. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but they were cleansing, not painful. Sometimes I still can't believe this is real, that I'm safe, that I have you, that we're having a baby. It feels like a dream. Then we're both dreaming. He kissed her gently, and I never want to wake up. A rider appeared on the trail, Red, as usual, bringing news and supplies from town. He'd taken it upon himself to be their link to civilization, seemed to enjoy having purpose again after years of solitary trapping. Special delivery, he called out, waving an envelope. Letter from Marshal Hayes. They gathered around as Red dismounted and handed over the letter. Inside was a brief note and a newspaper clipping. Hayes's note read, "Thought you'd want to see this. Justice finally served." The clipping was from a Helena newspaper. The headline read, "Garrett Empire dismantled assets to benefit victims." The article detailed how all of Garrett's property and holdings were being liquidated, with proceeds going to the families of his victims. Anna's father's mining claim, which Garrett had acquired through the marriage contract, was being returned to Marcus Whitmore, though the article noted he'd announced plans to sell it and donate the proceeds to a women's shelter being established in Copper Falls. Anna said. Maybe he does have some conscience left. Or maybe you shamed him into it, Red suggested. Either way, some good's coming from this mess. There was more news too. Several other wealthy men who'd been associated with Garrett were under investigation. The scandal had exposed a whole network of corruption. Change was coming to Montana territory, driven by one woman's courage to speak truth. You did that, Elias said quietly, reading over Anna's shoulder. You started this. We did that, Anna corrected. All of us. Red, Tom, Sam, Dr. Brenner, you. Everyone who chose to stand up instead of looking away. Red stayed for dinner, bringing them up to speed on all the town gossip. Garrett's execution date had been set for next spring, barring successful appeals. His lawyers were still fighting, but public opinion had turned completely against him. He'd become an example, a cautionary tale, a symbol of unchecked power finally held accountable. After Red left, as the sun set in spectacular gold and orange, Elias and Anna sat on their porch, a new addition he'd built just last month. They held hands, watching the day fade into night. Do you ever think about that morning at the train station? Anna asked. About what would have happened if you'd just collected your supplies and left me there? All the time. And I thank God I didn't. Elias squeezed her hand. Best decision I ever made, offering you my hand that day. Best decision I ever made was taking it. They sat in comfortable silence as stars began to appear, the same stars that had shone the night Anna arrived, but everything else had changed. She was no longer lost or afraid. He was no longer alone or grieving. They'd found each other in the worst circumstances and built something beautiful from the wreckage. Inside the lodge, the fire crackled warmly. Outside, the wilderness stretched vast and eternal. But here, on this porch, in this small circle of light and safety, two people who'd been broken had found wholeness. Anna touched her belly, feeling the flutter of new life. Their child would grow up knowing both parents had survived darkness, had fought for justice, had chosen love despite every reason not to. That was a powerful legacy, better than gold or property or any inheritance money could buy. "Tell me again," she said softly. "About the flowers Sarah loved. I want to plant them in the garden, so our baby knows her story too." So Elias talked about columbine and lupine and wild rose, about Sarah's joy in simple things, her kindness to strangers, her belief that goodness would ultimately triumph. And Anna listened, understanding that love didn't diminish by being shared, it multiplied. There was room in their hearts for Sarah's memory and for this new life they were building. Somewhere far below, trains ran on their tracks, carrying passengers to their destinations. Some would arrive safely, surrounded by love. Others would step off into uncertainty, maybe even danger. But sometimes, just sometimes, there would be someone waiting who chose kindness over convenience, someone who offered a hand to a stranger. Someone who started a chain of events that led to justice, to love, to life. Anna and Elias had been given a second chance, both of them in different ways. They'd taken that chance and built something remarkable. Now they would pass that gift forward, teaching their child that courage matters, that truth matters, that standing up for what's right matters, even when it's hard. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, the mountains stood eternal, and in a small lodge in the wilderness, hope took root and flourished. Proof that sometimes the wrong train leads to exactly the right destination.